Good evening. When it comes to enthralling a crowd, no one quite does it like the way Narendra Modi does it. He's done that numerous times in the past, and he did it once again today at the All Phones Arena in Sydney, Australia. But beyond all the rhetoric, beyond all the flourishing language, what exactly did his visit achieve? That's the focus on the news tonight. Welcome to the show. I'm Zaka Jacob. As always, the headlines up first. It's Madison Square Garden all over again as Narendra Modi enthralled 16,000 people at the All Phones Arena in Sydney. He promises visas on arrival for all Australian tourists. Details of the Mudgal Committee report are out. A clean chit to the BCCI chief in exile, N. Srinivasan, but it implicates his son-in-law, Gurunath Mayappan, as well as IPL COO Sundar Raman. Kicking off the celebrations for the 125th birth anniversary of Jawaharlal Nehru, Sonia Gandhi tries to re-energize a dispirited Congress party. Bad news for Narendra Modi's brother-in-arms, Shinzo Abe. Asia's second biggest economy slips into the red. Japan is now officially in recession as for the third quarter. Pressure on Prime Minister Abe and his famous Abenomics. And after being the object of attack at the G20, more trouble for Vladimir Putin, the European Union imposes more sanctions over his role in the crisis in Ukraine. And our top story on the news tonight comes from the All Phones Arena in Sydney, Australia, where Narendra Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Australia after 28 years. The last Prime Minister who went there was Rajiv Gandhi. On Tuesday, he did not fail to mention this to an adulatory audience of over 20,000 people at the All Phones Arena. And once again, very much like the Madison Square Garden in New York, Modi enchanted the Indian diaspora, urging overseas Indians to increase their investments back home, even as he promised steps like visas on arrival for Australian tourists.
At Sydney's All Phones Arena, a rock-star welcome for the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi once again charmed the Indian diaspora in his inimitable manner.
ये स्वागत, ये सम्मान,
this respect,
उत्साह,
enthusiasm,
उमंग, इसका हकदार
the person privileged to receive this.
इसका हकदार मोदी नहीं है.
Addressing the gathering of 20,000 people, Modi renewed the appeal he made to the sellout audience at New York's Madison Square Garden, urging Indian expatriates to invest back home. He also announced long-awaited steps like visa on arrival for Australians.
जितना हक हिंदुस्तान में रहने वाले हिंदुस्तानियों का है, उतना ही हक यहां पर रहने वाले मेरे देशवासियों का है. भारत में जो टूरिज्म बढ़ाने के लिए हम चाहते हैं, आप भी ऑस्ट्रेलिया के नागरिकों को कह सकते हैं, वीजा ऑन अराइवल. खुश?
Many of the thousands of expatriate Indians travelled nearly 1,000 kilometers on a train dubbed the Modi Express to clap and cheer. Incidentally, Modi's appearance at the arena came just a week after it hosted the Rolling Stones.
दुनिया से हम इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहते हैं. हम मेक इन इंडिया का अभियान लेकर के बैठे हैं. मैं चाहता हूं विश्व भारत की धरती पर आए, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में आए, क्योंकि हमारा मकसद एक है, मेरे देश के नौजवान को रोजगार मिले.
After the grand reception in Sydney, Narendra Modi arrived in Canberra, where he was received by Australian Minister for Foreign Affairs, Julie Bishop. On Tuesday, Modi will hold one-on-one bilateral talks with Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott.
ईश्वर ने आपको बहुत कुछ दिया होगा. आप पूंजीपति नहीं होंगे, लेकिन दो टंग अच्छे ढंग से खाना तो जरूर खा सकते होंगे. आप भी अपने गांव में, जहां के आप मूल रहने वाले हैं, इस काम में कुछ योगदान दे सकते तो जरूर दीजिए. मैं आपको निमंत्रण देता हूं.
Also lined up for Tuesday are meetings with members of Australian Capital Territory's Indian community and an official welcome outside Parliament House. About 3 lakh Indians live in Australia, but the trade between the two countries stands around $15 billion a year, which is just a tenth of that between Australia and China. Australia is emerging as a key source of thermal coal. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And Mr. Modi will address the Australian Parliament tomorrow morning, and we'll have that covered here on Rajya Sabha TV. Meanwhile, let's elaborate a little bit on the visa on arrival facility which he's now promised for Australian tourists. Addressing the packed Allphones Arena in Sydney, he also announced a 2-month deadline for the merger of the Overseas Citizens of India, OCI, with the Persons of Indian Origin, PIO status, this in a bid to try and woo the Indian diaspora. He'd made a similar announcement at the Madison Square Garden in New York during his visit to the United States back in September. That time, though, he had not given a timeline. Now he's saying he'll get this done before the Pravasi Bharati Divas in early January.
भारत में जो टूरिज्म बढ़ाने के लिए हम चाहते हैं, आप भी ऑस्ट्रेलिया के नागरिकों को कह सकते हैं, वीजा ऑन अराइवल। खुश?
A visa on arrival for tourists coming into India. What about Indians going abroad? We could do with more visas on arrival as well. Other news that we're tracking on the news tonight, the Mudgal Committee probing the IPL spot-fixing case has given a clean sheet to the BCCI president in exile, N. Srinivasan. However, it's implicated his son-in-law, in fact, Gurunath Mayappan, and Raj Kundra, the co-owner of the Rajasthan Royals team, of betting. The report did say that Srinivasan was aware of the misdemeanors that were happening right under his nose, but he chose not to take action.
In a big relief to the former BCCI chief N. Srinivasan, Justice Mudgal Committee has cleared his name of match fixing or scuttling the IPL spot fixing probe. But it has also said that the ICC president did not act despite being aware of betting in the tournament. It says that even former IPL COO Sundar Raman knew about the violation of players' code of conduct.
मैं किसी को सुपारी दे रहा हूं कि फलाने को जाके हत्या कर दो, वो आदमी जाके उसको हत्या कर दे रहा है, तो क्या मैं उस हत्या का मेरा दोष नहीं बनेगा कि मैंने उसका हत्या करवाया? जब वो हत्यारा पकड़ा जाता है, उसको जब पुलिस इन्वेस्टिगेशन में वो बताता है कि हमारे मालिक को सारे नॉलेज में है, तो फिर कैसे आप कह सकते हैं कि वो डायरेक्ट इन्वॉल्व नहीं है?
Whatever I have said in the report, we have said in the report, that is so. I am not making one extra word about it.
There were never any allegations against him, even in the beginning also, because let's wait for Supreme Court's observation on 24th November.
But the Mudgal Committee's findings could leave IPL teams Chennai Super Kings and Rajasthan Royals vulnerable. The report indicts Gurunath Mayappan and Raj Kundra of betting. IPL Code of Conduct says that if officials are found guilty of betting or match fixing, their teams could be scrapped.
There is a very deep-rooted corruption and conspiracy here. We've seen him sitting with players. We've seen him sitting in those boxes, whatever they called. He's been there all the time. So what else? He changed his Twitter handle after this case came into light. So whom they're trying to fool?
It is a very old institution, very respected institution. Over 80 years, the institution has been there, and it has reached its lowest, I would say. The federations and BCCI should also follow this, and he should give his attention to clean the BCCI mess also.
The report paves the way for Srinivasan to return to BCCI and even seek a second term as president. Earlier, Supreme Court had asked him to step aside as BCCI boss till investigations were completed. The BCCI annual general meeting is scheduled on 20th November, which will choose Srinivasan's successor to the post. With inputs from Ravindra Sharan, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, other news, a 2-day international conference on the 125th birth anniversary of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru started in the national capital today. It's organized by the Congress Party. The conference is aimed at highlighting the legacy as well as the worldview of the nation's first Prime Minister when his legacy is under attack. Now, while global leaders remembered Nehru for his contribution on the world stage, Congress President Sonia Gandhi used the occasion to reassert the importance of his core principles for India.
Rich tributes were paid to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru at the international conference organized by the Indian National Congress. A host of global leaders are attending the 2-day event on the 125th birth anniversary of independent India's first Prime Minister.
Nehru, as a nationalist, would say that he cannot tolerate alien domination. Nehru also, as a nationalist, would say, but this also should lead India to economic and social change.
Indeed, to Africa, especially those countries which were British colonies, Nehru was the inspiration for our independence aspirations.
Prime Minister Nehru encouraged our king to end Bhutan's policy of self-imposed isolation and embark on a process of planned development for which India would extend full support.
In her opening remarks, the Congress president referred to the defining principles of Nehru's policies, his adherence to secularism as an article of faith.
There could be no Indianness, no India without secularism. Secularism was and remains more than an ideal. It is a compelling necessity for a country as diverse as India.
With the party still struggling to come out of its worst electoral defeat both in Lok Sabha as well as in subsequent assembly elections, Sonia Gandhi quoted Nehru to lift morale of the party.
And he said, in a democracy, we have to know how to win and how to lose with grace. Those who win should not allow this to go to their heads. Those who lose should not feel dejected. The manner of winning or losing is even more important than the result.
The Congress also used the opportunity to rally around all the non-BJP and non-NDA parties under the plank of secularism. On day one, the leaders who attended the conference included Mamata Banerjee from Trinamool Congress, Prakash Karat and Sitaram Yechuri from the CPIM, former Prime Minister and JDS Chief H.D. Devegowda, JDU President Sharad Yadav, CPI's D. Rajya, NCP General Secretary D.P. Tripathi. Representatives of the SP, BSP, DMK, National Conference and the TDP were however not present. Vishal Daya, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
Thank you.
All right, the Sensex and Nifty have recorded yet another day of closing highs today. The Sensex surging more than 130 points, staging a strong comeback today to hit an intraday record high of 28,205. It surpassed its earlier record of 28,126 that was set just last week. It settled the day for 28,177. That's a new record close. The Nifty too following suit, rising by about 40 points to end at 84.30. That, of course, bettering last week's record of 83.83. More news from across the country in Nationwide. Yoga guru and anti-black money crusader Baba Ramdev has been given Z category security. The Home Ministry made the decision after security agencies reported an increased threat perception to the so-called Godman. So far, Ramdev was entitled to Z category security within the jurisdiction of the state of Uttarakhand, but now it's been extended on an all-India basis. Estranged cousins Raj and Uddhav Thackeray shared the stage today on the second death anniversary of Shiv Sena founder Bal Thackeray. Both the Sena and MNS chiefs spoke to each other. They also posed for photographs. Thousands of party workers also visited Bala Sahib's memorial. The Supreme Court dismissed a petition seeking the postponement of elections in Jammu and Kashmir. The J&K Awami National Conference had filed a petition on the grounds that flood relief and rehabilitation work was still underway in the state. The petition expressed concern that a free and fair election would not be possible under these circumstances. The Punjab and Haryana High Court pulled up the state government for not producing the self-styled godman Rampal in a contempt case. It issued a fresh non-bailable warrant against him after Rampal's counsel said he was unwell. Rampal was charged with interfering in judicial proceedings at the Hisar Sessions Court back in July. We're going to take a break here in the program. When we come back, just a week to go before the SAARC summit, and Pakistan once again calling for a resumption of talks with India. The Indian response is no talks till the firing stops from across the border. That story and more when the News Tonight returns. Welcome back to the News Tonight. I'm Zaka Jacob. Now, a week before the SAARC summit kicks off in Nepal, India has once again ruled out the resumption of talks with Pakistan. Now, this comes after the Pakistani High Commissioner Abdul Basit once again emphasized that bilateral talks should not be held hostage by the Kashmir issue. The Foreign Secretary level talks between India and Pakistan were called off back in August after the envoy met with separatist leaders from Kashmir. But political parties have once again reiterated the need to shun the violation of ceasefire to expect any kind of resumption in the talks.
So much scope between our two countries, and we need to really work together in order to realize that potential and harness that potential which is there between our two countries.
Diplomatic level dialogue has to happen, and that will happen only if Pakistan stops violations at the borders and Pakistan eschews the path of violence. And despite repeated reminders, I think these incidents continue to happen at our international border as well as at the LOC.
हिंदुस्तान हमेशा पाकिस्तान से बात करने के लिए तैयार रहा है, लेकिन पाकिस्तान इस तरीके के हालात पैदा करे जिन हालात में बातचीत की जा सकती है। ऐसा मुमकिन नहीं है कि सरहदों पर वो खड़े होकर गोलियां चलाते रहें और दिल्ली में बैठकर बातचीत की दुहाई देते रहें, ये संभव नहीं है।
So, both Prime Ministers of Pakistan and India will be in Kathmandu next week for the SAARC summit. The possibility of a meeting on the sidelines has been cancelled officially, at least. We'll see what happens next week. Meanwhile, more bilateral visits happening. The governor of the U.S. state of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, met with the External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj today. Leading South Carolina's first ever trade and investment delegation to India, Nikki Haley held talks on economic issues. In an effort to try and attract more investment to her state, Haley is on a 10-day visit to India just after winning re-election, that is, a few days ago. She's trying to position South Carolina as a top investment as well as tourist destination. The Japanese economy is now officially in recession. Asia's second largest economy contracted by 1.6% in the quarter between July and September. This after consumer spending got clobbered on the back of a sales tax hike back in the summer. Both Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and the Bank of Japan now have their task cut out. Abenomics is coming unstuck, and how? Close to 2 years after he was elected, promising to revive a moribund Japanese economy, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's flagship economic program is coming off its wheels. The Japanese economy slipped into recession in the third quarter, taking both politicians and market players off guard. GDP fell at an annualized 1.6% in the quarter between July and September, and this is on the back of a drop of 7.3% in the second quarter. The Japanese economy is bearing the brunt of a sales tax hike back in April, which has clobbered consumer spending.
今後の景気動向を注意深く見守る必要があると考えており、これを踏まえて適切に対応していきたいと思います。
That's not all. The slump in global crude is putting downward pressure on inflation.
日銀のターゲットとして 2% にはまだ全く達してない、道半ばっていうような状況だと思うんですね。そういう意味ではまだ払拭はできていない。
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is in Australia for the G20, where among others he met with his brother-in-arms, Narendra Modi. At a time when the Japanese economy has slipped into recession, can it keep its promise of $35 billion FDI to India? Let's hope that the Modi-Abe bromance can survive this. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. While the Japanese economy is in recession, the US economy is growing, but they've got a big problem with the Islamic State and the so-called war on that outfit. Now President Barack Obama has lashed out at the IS a day after the terror group beheaded yet another American, this time aid worker Peter Kasich. Kasich was the fifth victim of beheadings by the Islamic State. Obama's called this latest handiwork an act of pure evil.
A day after Islamic State released this video, the world is trying hard to come in terms with the horror of its actions.
Your forces behind your proxies and withdrawn the rest.
On Monday, US President Barack Obama paid tributes to Peter Kasich, calling him a humanitarian. Obama condemned the terrorist, stating that he was killed in an act of pure evil by a terrorist group that the world rightly associates with inhumanity. Hours after the US government confirmed the beheading, New York Senior Senator Charles Schumer called on Congress to approve Obama's funding request for an increased military spending against the Islamic State.
The president has asked for an allocation to train, not for boots on the ground, combat boots on the ground, I'd be opposed to that, but to train Iraqi troops and to augment the air war against ISIS, which has been very successful.
Meanwhile, the heartbroken parents of Kasich, Ed and Pola released a statement, and I quote, "We are incredibly proud of his son for living his life according to his humanitarian calling. We will work every day to keep his legacy alive as best as we can." Foreign officials in France said that there was a very strong likelihood that an Islamic State militant who appears in the beheading video could be a French citizen. One of the men shown herding prisoners to the execution site could possibly be Maxime Hochot, a Frenchman who left for Syria in August 2013. Kasich is the fifth Westerner whom the IS claims to have beheaded, after US journalists James Foley, Stephen Sotloff, David Haynes and Alan Henning. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And our thoughts and prayers with Kasich's family. From one crisis to another, this one in Ukraine, and fresh clashes between pro-Russian rebels and government forces are now threatening to undermine what is already a shaky ceasefire. At least 9 more people were killed as EU foreign ministers have been deliberating ways to try and de-escalate the situation. The sanctions still now haven't quite worked, at least in as far as getting Vladimir Putin and Russia to change course. So much so now the EU is looking at finding an out-of-the-box solution.
European Union foreign ministers met in Brussels Monday against the backdrop of fresh fighting in Ukraine. The group is mulling imposition of tougher sanctions against Russia. But not everyone in the European Union is on the same page. Some members say sanctions should only be an ancillary measure.
Sanctions in themselves are not a target, are not an objective. They can be an instrument if they come together with other measures. And I think it's time that the European Union and the ministers concentrate also on the other issues that we have to build for having a complete strategy.
Yeah, I believe it should be all variety of sanctions. Whether, if it's possible, I don't know, we will discuss. But as you said, targeted measures against individuals, it's a must, I believe. Because they're working, they have effect in spite of some denials, but this is really something we really can make a difference.
The new sanctions, if agreed upon, will be limited to only Russian-backed separatists. But German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Europe will continue sanctions against Russia for as long as they're needed.
Russland verletzt die territoriale Integrität und die staatliche Souveränität der Ukraine. Ein Nachbarstand Russlands, die Ukraine, wird als Einflusssphäre angesehen. Das stellt nach den Schrecken zweier Weltkriege.
Despite attempts to negotiate an end to the battle, a faltering ceasefire exists in eastern Ukraine, with 9 more killed in Donetsk on Monday. The G20 summit, which ended Sunday, also turned into a showdown between Western leaders and Putin, following fresh reports of Russian troops pouring into eastern Ukraine. The Kremlin denies the allegations. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
We'll take another break here on the program. When we come back, we'll continue in Australia. While Narendra Modi was enthralling crowds in Sydney, China and Australia have signed a major free trade deal. It opens up China's services sector and Australia's mining sector in a huge way. We'll get you the details when the News Tonight returns. Welcome back to the News Tonight. More international stories coming up in Global Buzz. Pakistan today successfully test-fired the intermediate-range Shaheen-1A ballistic missile. It's capable of carrying nuclear as well as conventional warheads up to a range of 900 kilometers. Pakistan's military says the launch was aimed at revalidating various design and technical parameters of the Shaheen weapon system. China and Australia signed a landmark free trade agreement expanding bilateral trade ties between both countries. The deal will open up the Chinese markets, particularly its services sector, to Australia's farm exporters in a big way. It's also aimed at easing curbs on Chinese investment into Australia. The deal has been hailed by Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott as the best ever agreement between Beijing and any Western country. US President Barack Obama defended the transparency of his signature healthcare law, the Affordable Care Act. He said the law, which extends private health coverage to uninsured Americans, was extensively analyzed before it was passed back in 2010. He rejected claims that his government misled the financing of this project. A fire in a factory in China's Shandong province killed at least 18 people. 13 others were also injured in the tragedy. The cause is still to be ascertained. From all the international stories to all the sports stories in SportsBeat. World champion Magnus Carlsen holds the advantage over Vishwanathan Anand going into Game 7 of the World Chess Championship. With a win in the last game, Carlsen currently leads Anand by 1 point. He will have the advantage of playing white pieces in today's game. After 6 games, Carlsen has 3.5 points, Anand has 2.5. World number 1 Novak Djokovic won the season-ending ATP World Tour Finals after Roger Federer pulled out because of an injury. The 33-year-old Swiss announced that he was not match fit. He apologized in person to the crowd at the O2 Arena. This is Djokovic's 4th title at the season-ending event. Netherlands revived their Euro 2016 hopes with a stunning 6-0 victory over Latvia. Arjen Robben, Klaas-Han Huntelaar both scoring twice as Robin van Persie and Bruma were also on target. The win was crucial for Dutch coach Guus Hiddink in the backdrop of 2 defeats from 3 games. Croatia clinched a vital 1-1 draw against Italy in the European qualifier, hampered by an unruly crowd. The match was delayed because of disturbance by the spectators. The match was temporarily stopped in both halves after visiting fans threw fireworks and smoke bombs onto the pitch. UEFA is likely to launch an investigation into this matter. And that should do it in this Monday edition of the News Tonight. From me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the team, thanks for your time. We'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.